It is the worst humanitarian disaster of this century. The conflict in Sudan has seen horrific atrocities unleashed on its population and driven 13 million people to flee their homes, some to camps like this one across the border in Chad.
Adre is 85% women and children. That's because so often the men where they've come from have been executed, rounded up to fight, or simply disappeared.
We've seen rape being used as a weapon of war in this conflict in a way that we've never seen before.
People here are desperate for help, but is anyone listening? Families with exhausted children who've made it across the border into Chad. There's precious little for them here, but where they've come from is so much worse. This lady tells us she was driven out both by the fighting and the lack of food.
So it's very difficult to make a life which has become impossible in Sudan.
What made you decide to leave Sudan?
It's like no country, nothing to eat, no family, all the people ran away and then nothing called Sudan to stay. Just war, nothing called Sudan, just war and suffering. That's why we leave.
Despite the brutality of this war, the extreme suffering here is largely going unseen. On this trip, the Foreign Secretary, accompanied by the actress Carey Mulligan, an ambassador for War Child, is trying to force other countries to step up.
Too often people are just looking away, and as we've seen here, women and children of Sudan are being badly let down, and people who have been driven from their homes face the most horrendous of violence, and with the international community needs to come together to support them.
At the reception centre, new arrivals, many of whom have been on the move for weeks, are checked for malnutrition by the width of their tiny arms. It used to be only the babies who'd received the high-protein paste called plumpy nut, but now such is the state of those arriving from regions where famine is taking hold. Everyone needs it.
One of the things you notice here is that there are hardly any men. Adre is 85% women and children. That's because so often the men where they've come from have been executed, rounded up to fight, or simply disappeared. And the women too are coming here with terrible stories of suffering.
We've seen rape being used as a weapon of war in this conflict in a way that we've never seen before. Aid workers saying almost every woman they talk to has a story of the kind of violence that they have personally experienced. And we cannot let these atrocities go unpunished.
The accusation is that the UAE, a key ally of the UK, is supplying weapons to one of the factions. Why aren't we doing more to put pressure on the UAE?
There is a real concern about arms flows coming in through different routes to the different parties, and that's why it's so important that we have an end to the arms flows and that all countries put maximum pressure on these two military groups who are destroying Sudan.
The international community did not do enough to stop mass executions of unarmed civilians being carried out in November after the siege of El Fasher in Darfur, when blood-stained streets could be seen from space. The fighting has now moved to the neighbouring region of Kordofan, with the army in the last few days taking the two key cities of Dilling and Kadugli, which had been besieged for more than 2 years by the rival RSF paramilitary group, which is also attacking the city of El Abid.
So I'm deeply concerned about the continuing fighting and the escalation as well, because we know there were huge atrocities committed in El Fasher. I'm really worried that El Abid could be another El Fasher if we don't act, if we don't have some urgency behind the international talks, behind the international pressure for a ceasefire.
Back in the camps in Chad, where refugees queue for rations that have been cut by more than a half, charities are warning that the level of funding, particularly after President Trump withdrew most US aid, is no longer enough to keep up with demand.
With the level of funding and with the apparent donor fatigue, what do you fear will happen next?
So I fear that we will have to go back to see our beneficiaries and tell them that we need to reduce the ration more. Or we need to choose between who is going to eat and who is going to not eat.
And the consequences of that?
Level of malnutrition is increasing, so the consequences are going to be on the most vulnerable, so the children, that they won't have food to eat.
We understand the British government will increase pressure on the warring factions and support for Sudan in the coming weeks, but it will take more than that to bring this war and the unbearable suffering of the Sudanese to an end. Romilly Weeks, ITV News, Adre.